Art Ovation Hotel in Sarasota. And I have the pleasure of being with Jose Margulis, who is the artist featured in the exhibition Alternative Realities that is being shown from November 2018 till April 2019. So welcome, Jose.
Thank you, Francis.
I would like for you to tell us a little bit about your life as an artist and how you became an artist, because you have a very unique experience from that perspective that I would like to share with the people who are coming to see the show.
Well, I wasn't supposed to be an artist. I come from a very different background, even though there's art in my family background. I was groomed from a very young age to be an entrepreneur, to be an industrialist. Never went to art school. I'm a lousy drawer. I love paint. I just don't know what to do with it.
You grew up surrounded by Venezuelan geometric abstraction.
Correct.
So your abstract language does have a background physically and in your subconscious. So you should not be surprised.
Absolutely. But what I found really interesting in that regard is the fact that even though I've been exposed to geometry since a very young age, I never saw it as I never saw the graphical element. I never saw it as an aesthetic element. I never saw it as a decorative element. I always saw a lot of emotion in it. I felt a very deep connection to non-representational art, and because it spoke to me, it was so open. It was so, for me, representational art. It just doesn't allow me space to make an introspect. To have an inner trip, to travel and use that to connect with my soul or with my thinking. And since I was very little, I just got so much emotion out of geometry that it hit me and it connected me. It says, okay, art can actually be anything, and actually it spoke to me, even though I love painting, as I said, and I love sculpture, and I love traditional art in general. The connection was to a much deeper level through geometry than never. And I guess that stayed with me, and then when the right moment came and I had the tools in my hand, that's exactly what came out. What you're seeing here is part of a long-term art investigation process that I started a few years back, and it's one of functional art. My thesis, it's that I want to investigate, I want to research, I want to find out a little bit more on this gray area. It's a line that divides what I call artistic design from actual functional art. In what moment a very beautiful design of a functional piece becomes functional art? There's got to be a difference in between the two. And my hypothesis about it is that it all has to do with your perspective, where you start from. And I start from the idea that I'm never designing a table or a lamp, but I'm designing a sculpture which size and measurements and proportions happen to meet those of a table, a lamp, or something else. Okay, this is Minimal Totem. This is an all-aluminum piece. This is the largest all-aluminum piece that I've ever made. It's a quest to conquer the outdoors. What I'm searching going outdoors with this type of element is that the spectator doesn't move, and actually the vibration comes from what happens behind, from natural movements, either the clouds or trees or anything that moves generates movement behind the piece, and you see it through it. generates the kinetic vibration. So the idea is that it's sort of a kinetic filter for what happens in nature. And this piece is called Minimal Totem, and it's inspired and represented by two things. It's inspired by 2001 Space Odyssey, the Stanley Kubrick movie, in which this monolith appears in the movie in several occasions. And I've learned back when I saw that movie in school that that monolith represents all the block of unknown knowledge in the world. And as the movie progresses, this element reappears at different times and different ages of mankind. And what it was paradoxical and ironical is that the more evolved society was, the bigger the monolith. Always keeping the same proportions, but it seems that the more we know that we don't know. And that's very important part of the inspiration for this piece. And the other inspiration for it, it's the Slaves of Michelangelo, which is this sculptures that Michelangelo did out of marble pieces, where he carved part of the piece and he left the rest of the piece uncarved in natural mode. And he used to say that the sculpture lies inside the piece, and the artist, what it does is just to remove the excesses, to have it revealed. So in a way, I'm evoking those pieces as a carving of this monolith, this column. It's just like this is inside of it, and I'm just removing the excess of it.
Interesting aspects of his exhibition is the way you present three-dimensional work with photography, with other three-dimensional pieces that are wall pieces as opposed to freestanding pieces, and in this particular case, a sound piece. So tell us a little bit about the connection between all these works that were created specifically for this exhibition at Adoration Hotel.
The basis of my work and the basis of this exhibition particularly is called Alternative Realities. Is that I'm trying to create a visual expression of some thoughts coming as inspirations from quantum physics in comparison to traditional Newtonian physics. It's an odd theme to get inspiration from, but I really think I'm really starting, what I really started working based on the idea that everything in this universe, it's made out of exactly the same particles in multiple infinite arrangements, which is epitomizes the definition of creativity in itself. So the idea of having alternative realities, that is a theme that it's very well connected with philosophical aspects of quantum physics. In that sense, the idea of creating an actual piece and then photographing it and transforming that image into something else, it evokes the idea of an alternative reality. So these are multiple expressions of a same object in a way, in a rearrangement of molecules, if you want to take it all the way down to the first site. In this case, the Ocean Ridge sculpture, it's for me, it's very important. It's very interesting because it's the first all aluminum piece. Most of my work, it's done using plexiglass as a media, and I use some aluminum composite as a background. But this was actually the first piece that was all made out of aluminum. And it's a swing because I want to interact with the piece. I want to add this additional dimension, this additional input, sensory input, which is not only you can look at it, but you can touch it. Once you can touch it, which is a really special theme or a special concept in art, in which usually you don't touch things. You know, you don't want to touch the art piece because you can damage it. But the actual sensory input that you get by touching and feeling, it's very important to me. And in this case, talking about sound, I will tell you because this was one of those little accidents, you know, that are fun and happy. The fact is that this piece as a swing, you know, as it moves, it's connected to a rod, and this rod generates this sound. Then initially I didn't like it, and I had to change, actually. I changed the bar so in a way it wouldn't sound, because it wasn't what I planned it to. But the moment, you know, from the first moment that the sculpture had this little swing sound. It connected me to my childhood and in a way that remind me of the sound of swings, in parks. And that sound just stuck to me. And once I changed it to the bar that didn't have the sound, actually I missed it. And I, as I said, I changed it because it wasn't my initial intention. But once I didn't have that sound, I really missed it so much that I just had to turn it all back to get this sound that, again, it was an accident, but it was a happy accident.
So one of the things we discussed when we first started planning this exhibition was the opportunity you had to put together three-dimensional pieces and photographs that reflected that three-dimensional piece and that kind of game that you established between the two. So I would like for you to talk a little bit about it and how important this experience has been for you as an artist.
Great, awesome. Well, let me begin by this. Again, these are the little accidents that you encounter as an artist when you're developing and you're curious about the work. The fact is that when I started making three-dimensional pieces, I needed to photograph them, which is my actual background, just for cataloging and having something to show. And once I started photographing them, I find out that these three-dimensional pieces are extremely photogenic, and I started looking at the pictures, and they were so beautiful that it's like there's way more than just cataloging possibilities in those images. That's how I started using the photography here. And then the images that we're seeing here that are like third stage of development around the idea. It was not just the cataloging of it, but then I started tweaking them. I started using these close-up shots of the sculptures as the building blocks for using Photoshop and some other programs to start manipulating and creating this new geometry based on those. And the value of it is the fact that the photorealism that you get out of actually photographing an object and not just recreating digitally, it's very specific because it really tricks the eye. It gives you a sense of depth in the image that you cannot get in any other way. And the fact that you have this photograph that could only exist if you have the actual building of a sculpture beforehand, for me, it gives them, it compresses a lot of interest and value in it and uniqueness. There's no other way for this piece to exist unless you go through the whole process of building the actual object for photographing. Then that idea evolved, and that's when I started working on this, because I was reading a lot of interesting things about physics and science, and that's where this idea connected, the fact that you could have multiple realities of the same object, and that's when I started envisioning the idea of having things side by side and having this visual connection in between them that in a way reveals more of the essence of the piece, of the object, because actually the lines get blurred because the photograph became an object in itself. So I started using this photograph independently, and as I mentioned before, this is the first time that I really have it as an intention. The fact that they're both together and displaying this double nature.
We were talking about that printing process and how you started almost like cutting and pasting digitally.
Yeah.
And it evolved into these, which are some of the most recent pieces. So since we're here, why don't you tell us about these wonderful pieces that are, like I said, unique and open a whole new Pandora box for the new series that you're working on now.
I'll tell you a little bit about this because obviously it's very exciting for me because actually these are my latest pieces. It's like the latest step. I don't like to call it evolution. I used to call it that an artist it's evolving. I'm not sure if I think.
No, because it's linear, and you don't think in terms of linear
Correct,
ways.
because it just connects to the linear motion, and I really think that you just develop it like a spider. You know, it's just like web. You can be working on different levels and different things at the same time. And it doesn't mean that one it's feeding off the other. I think that one inspires another. You know, and it allows you to jump in these quantum leaps from one place, one position to the other. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a linear way, but it is consistent. The fact that you can take my whole work, you know, and you can see this connection, that you can sense, and it's a word that it's very easily used. You know, you can sense an evolution, but it's really not an evolution. And the reason I say this is that sometimes I go back to older styles that I've done in the past, and they're as current as the new ones. It was just a different investigation. It was an expression of a different idea. But talking about...
Let's talk about molecules, and also the title is very important.
Well,
talking about quantum physics.
Yeah, well, see, I think that when, for some reason, well, I know the reason, but I try to go to basics, you know, like what is essential, what is the basis of everything. I think that when you live in such a complex world as we're living right now, you need to come to basics, because in basics you find solid ground where to stand. Okay, and when we come to basics, we go, okay, what is the molecule? Molecule, you know, it's just like the secondary, the first minimal construction in the universe. You know, you take all these elements, and molecules are 2, 3, 4, 5 of these elements, atoms connected to form a molecule. So it is in a sense, I mean, it's a loose interpretation. These are actually not designs of actual molecules, but just the concept grounds me and brings me down to the idea of something, you know, very essential. There is a very big difference between something simple and something basic. I'm always trying to go to basics. I don't want to keep it simple, because life, even as we see it, it's never simple. It can be basic, but not simple. And in this case, molecules, I was from the artistic point of view, from the work point of view, this is just trying to add layers of complexity to a work that at its surface seems very basic and very simple. Basically, what I'm doing here artistically is that I'm using the background to mimic the foreground, and then I'm hand painting for the very first time, you know, and I could paint the edges of the material just to recreate, to create this visual effect.
You have the background,
and then I have the
acrylic sheet,
yeah,
cut.
And then I have a print in the background.
And then you have a print in the background, but then for the first time you add
the edges, the color on the edges. You know? And it's pretty very exciting, because it's just like adding new words to your vocabulary. So these are the very first pieces that I've done with this idea, and ever since I made this, I've just kept going, and you become more articulate with it. You know? And so you know where the direction is going. I'm beginning to build longer sentences with this new vocabulary of using the color edges, you know, and the color background connected to the piece and the elements.
And we're going to see some of the different developments throughout the exhibition.
Correct.
So.